How's it going, guys? Episode number 13 of True Health. This is kind of a haphazard show today, but in a very good way. We had to change plans last minute. I kind of like that sometimes. Again, you get me giving you some random musings. But if you're joining me live, you have the opportunity to win some stuff today. So if you ask a question, I'll enter you into a drawing. We'll be giving away some scratch. Sorry if you're listening to this later or watching. So we got daily, we got exercise, we got this hat. Check this thing out. This thing is sweet. Some stickers, some other stuff from Scratch. So Scratch does not sponsor this podcast, by the way. We just have a lot of Scratch stuff. I like the products. We're going to give it away. So ask a question. You'll get entered into the drawing. So the first thing I want to talk about today is kidney stones in goats. Strange topic, right? I was at my dad's house that is up in Jasper, Alabama a couple weeks ago, and they have two goats, and they might as well be pets. They're walking around and everything. They can't keep flowers growing. The trees get eaten before they can get tall enough to, come to anything. But these goats live on a primarily grain diet because even though there's grass, obviously, they can't comprise their entire diet from foraging. So this is something that I didn't know, that it is really common for goats, probably other animals, goats to get kidney stones or what's called urinary calculi. So basically calcium deposition within the kidney and even within the ureter and the bladder due to an imbalance of calcium and phosphorus in their diet. And the reason that this calcium-phosphorus imbalance comes about is because of the way that grain is grown and then processed. And this forms these calculi, or what is more commonly referred to as struvite crystals. Now, all that fancy goat kidney stone jargon out of the way, why I bring this up is when I was talking to my stepmom in particular, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus with the story, I just think this is a good example of something we actually talked about last week. When Lisa, one of our viewers last week, asked a question about basically how our food sources are becoming depleted of micronutrients and the food is changing, my answer to that question last week was you have to look at the next step out, the fact that we're actually altering the environment, which then alters the food, then which alters us and alters our internal environment. So we can't just look at like, hey, we're genetically modifying the food. No, we're altering the environment on a macro scale, but we tend to turn to food. One of our marketing director in here has a company that is called Fuel Body Feed Soul. She was supposed to be on the podcast today. We'll get her back on here. I'm going to mention that so she knows that we want her on the show. The kind of their mantra, and I don't want to misspeak here, but their message that they put on social media, follow them, Fuel Body Feed Soul, is to not basically fall captive or slave to the diet culture, right? That a certain diet will save you, or the elimination of certain foods will save you, or the incorporation of certain foods, like a superfood or some certain specific subset of foods will cure you, help you lose weight. What we need to realize is that we should be eating foods based on what our body needs from the nutrient level, but also sometimes what makes us feel good from a mental level. And then also when we're in social environments, that what we eat is going to change. Now, if we take any of those too far, we start to create problems, but it's not a food problem, that's a mindset problem. So let's go back to the goat story. When I was talking to my stepmom, she brought up, that goat, we just had to, and this is an explicit show, so we can say whatever we want. They had to cut the end of the goat's penis off. And I was like, what? You had to cut the end of its penis off? She's like, yeah. Goat's penis is somewhat like a curlicue, I guess. I'm not a goat anatomist by any means. So if we have any vet friends out there that want to comment on this, that would be great. Basically, as they get these renal calculi, or these struvite crystals, the ureter backs up, and it gets so backed up that they end up cutting it off. Well, eventually, it goes so far that they will take a male goat and end up cutting his penis all the way off, and they almost have to make a vagina, so they undergo a sex change, more or less, so that the goat can urinate. Pretty sad when you realize the reason this is happening is because we're altering the goat's food, i.e. the goat's environment, because they don't have the ability to go get their own food because they are domesticated animals. But my stepmom said, well, yeah, it's because of the grain. You know, we feed them grain. And my first thought was, well, it's the grain, right? It's this altered grain, and it's probably, you know, got all this crap in it. Well, not necessarily. It's just the fact that the only thing they are eating is grain, which creates that calcium-phosphorus imbalance. And now we have a problem. So this is exactly like this mindset of, hey, if I just eat a ketogenic diet, I'll be okay. Well, not necessarily. It comes with its own subset of problems if we become too strict with any one thing. Same thing if I say, well, I'm going to eliminate all sugar. Sugar's the devil. That's fine. Sugar in large proportions and in certain aspects, the way that you're going to get sugar, right, in a fast-burning, simple carb processed form, probably not the best. In a natural, low-glycemic fruit with fiber in addition to the sugar, probably not a bad idea. But we demonize these things because I think it's easier to live by a set of standards or rules rather than understanding that, you know, food is food, and it does a lot of different things for us, right? Food is, as weird as it sounds, it's nourishing your soul, right? That's why it's soul food. Also, the fact that we should be eating food in more social environments, right? The family dinner has been talked about, dying for a long time in America. There's a lot of truth to the fact that the more that we eat, and it's been shown, the more that you eat in isolation or by yourself, the more you eat. So we tend to overeat. The poorer food choices you make, probably because there's not other people around you, so you don't have the social pressure of, ooh, I should eat healthy. But also when we're in group settings, we don't eat as much because we're interacting, hopefully. One thing we hope in a social environment that we see at restaurants and things like that, or at least I do, is everybody's just on their phone. So we're in this pseudo social meal setting. And I think there's something to be said for, you know, maybe we remove the rules from the foods that we eat, and maybe we shouldn't be creating rules. But if we're going to create rules, let's create standards or principles around how we eat, right? We eat consciously. We make good decisions about what we eat. We make good decisions about how we eat, right? Not just shoveling it into my face, like actually tasting the food, which there's research that shows, as crazy as this sounds, that food made at home, homemade food, actually has different nutrient density than food that you would buy like fast food, even if it's the exact same food. We don't know exactly why, but if you get into all the weird woo-woo energy stuff, you got to think that on that quantum level that you're putting your energy into the food, that's got to change that food at some point. But that's been researched. I'll try to find an article for that. But that's my long-winded way to give an interesting thought on how we're altering the animals that we're around. And like I will tell you, our dog, we feed him pretty good food. He's a black lab. They're notorious for having these basically benign growths or cysts. I know anybody out there with a lab, probably you experience this. It's just insane to me how even these good foods probably aren't the greatest thing in the world. And the funny thing is, we pay, I don't know, $45 for a bag of dog food. Maybe not that much. When I was growing up, and I tell this to my wife all the time, and I know she just rolls her eyes, we used to dump dog food like on the ground for the dogs that were outside year-round in Illinois, which it gets really cold in Illinois and it gets really hot. And I tell people that, and they're like, oh my God, I feel so bad for those dogs. They were dogs. They didn't know any different. They did just fine. They ate Olroy from Farm King off of the ground. Our dogs never had these benign tumors or cysts. One dog lived to be, I believe, Rue, if Angie or my dad wants to comment on this, I think she was 16. Sydney lived to be 18 years old. Like, these were healthy dogs. And what did they do every once in a while? They go killed something, and they ate a wild animal. They rolled around in dead stuff. They ate dead stuff. They ate grass. They ate placenta from an animal that gave birth on the farm. all very natural stuff. We rob these things from the environment of a domesticated animal. We wonder why now we have a dog that we're watching that has thyroid dysfunction. How many dogs have diabetes now? Like my parents' dog had glaucoma. Like, this is insane. Now we're in this culture where we spend more money almost on our pets' health than we will on our own, right? There's a functional medicine vet right up the road from us. I think that's awesome that exists, but I think it's also crazy that has to exist, that we don't realize that I have to take my dog or my cat or my gerbil or whatever your pet preference is to a functional medicine veterinarian, because I don't realize if I just made the environment of that animal a little more mirrored to their natural environment, they'd probably do a heck of a lot better. But we need to do that for ourselves. So that's my rant on that. I'm going to put articles to just interesting stuff from a couple like farm blogs on these urinary calculi and goats, just so you can read. It's, but think about in your life, like how this mirrors or echoes into your life. It's interesting stuff. Again, remember, if you guys have questions, got comments, hit me with them so we can give away some of the scratch, but also so we can get some interaction going. I see we got quite a few people watching here. Next thing, I was absolutely blown away last night when I watched let me make sure I know the name of it. Yeah, a Netflix live, well, it wasn't a live show, it was a stage show, Darren Brown's Miracle. So Darren Brown, and I'm going to put a link to his website. Darren Brown, if you just happen to listen to this, which I'm going to tag you, I would love to have you on the podcast someday. Darren Brown is a mentalist, an English mentalist. He, not purported, but I'm pretty sure he's heavily studied neurolinguistics and basically just a freak when it comes to reading people and understanding the psychological manifestations of our body, but also the mentalist aspect is how to basically hypnotize people, get people to do what you want, basically implant thoughts into other people. In this show, it's mind-blowing. Like, it's absolutely mind-blowing. But my thought, and he even demonstrates some of this stuff, he works on pain. He has people, and he equivalates it to like an evangelical experience where you have like faith healing occurring. And he's trying to point out that maybe there's some charlatan type business going on in these settings, which I think there are for sure. But he's trying to elucidate that these are tactics built on understanding human psychology. And even more so, I think it helps pull the curtains back on how little we understand about my field in particular. So something that's come about in the past 10 years due to people like Lorimer Moseley and Butler and these other people is the pain neuroscience explanation. And in my field, for anybody that doesn't know what that means, if you're not a clinician or a coach or something like that, basically that means when we understand how our body can respond, and sometimes respond aberrantly or exaggerate pain response, that sometimes that can create pain that's not really attached to pathology, or the pain doesn't match the amount of pathology. The example from Lorimer Moseley, who is a researcher out of Australia, the story that gets us started, there's a really good TED Talk. I'll put a link to that TED Talk. But the quick story there is he was walking through the bush on a walkabout. I don't know if that was proper Australian accent or not. But he was walking along, and he felt what he thought was like a shrub brush his leg. Well, however much longer, a little bit of time passed, he was bitten by a brown snake. Brown snake, I think, is in the top 3 deadliest venomous snakes in the world. Had to be rushed to the hospital. Luckily, he was okay, got some anti-venom and everything. Well, quite a few years later, he was again on a walkabout, and he felt a shrub brush his leg, and he went down, hit the floor in excruciating pain, yelling, screaming, and when he looks down, it was a shrub. So his nervous system, and I used to say brain, I don't say brain anymore. We don't understand enough about the human nervous system to say that everything is happening here. We need to start realizing that stuff is happening through our body, not brain down and not top up. It's kind of everything at once. But he's basically had this huge pain response to a somewhat benign input based on basically a previously stored pain memory. We'll call that a neurotag. So that kind of spurred his research, which he was already in this field, and it just, fueled his own N=1. So what we have to realize is we don't understand enough about our nervous system to really probably even understand fully what we do in my field, right? And we've always known that the social interaction or the patient-practitioner interaction or coach-athlete interaction or, psychiatrist-patient interaction, massage therapist-client interaction is extremely important to outcomes. And when we try to reduce or remove the interaction, we realize that our outcomes tank, right? And this is not just, saying you need to be charismatic, you need to be nice, you need to have good bedside manner. It's actually understanding how to interact with people, right? And I think we're losing this. Go back to what I was saying about people sitting around the dinner table with their phone. We're losing the ability to just have baseline communication skills like we used to, right? So people aren't as good face-to-face communicators as they used to be. I think everybody would, for the most part, agree with that. Well, then what you got to understand is, so if we have a population of people that's going into these fields that are trying to help other people that don't have great communication skills to start with, and now we need to take those up a notch where we have to actually understand that we are 100% affecting other people's subconscious thoughts. We're affecting the story that they tell themselves through the way we communicate. And this does not mean to say that when somebody comes in my office, my job is to trick that person into thinking that they're not in pain. I think a lot of people, when we get into this hot and heavy topic of pain neuroscience, people think, it's one or two things. You're a manual practitioner, you're going to put hands on people, we're going to do some work, we're going to do some exercise, or I never touch people. I explain how pain occurs in the body, how there's these gross response to benign inputs or chronic pain around an initial insult that doesn't exist anymore. And it's absolutely both, because we know there's power in touch, right? And I'm not saying like creepy, Catholic priest touch. I'm talking like touch. Putting hands on somebody, which again, you got to think about the energy transfer that it's occurring on a quantum level. I know that seems very weird, but we just don't know enough to, shake our head at that. And John is sending me a text right now. Let's see if I can open this up. John Ellis is watching on here. So John is a clinician. He's another chiropractor in New Hampshire, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, John. Maybe via Facebook. He says that he tells a story about the snake to at least one patient a week, if not 5. Nice to know someone else read Explain Pain. So Explain Pain was co-written. Why am I blanking? Butler and Mosley co-wrote that book. It's a very good book. Put a link to it. It is written for the lay person. It's a good patient education book, especially somebody that may be dealing with chronic pain. But basically what I'm getting to is it's got to be a good mix of those. But when we get into these people like Darren Brown, this was flooring to me, the effects he was having on people, which I know this is a show. So part of a placebo is the observer effect, right? We know that a photon or a quark will shift paths based on the observer effect. And there's a lot of different theories why that is. And if you have no clue what I'm talking about right there, just basically basic quantum physics is you watch something, it alters what that thing does. Now, put people in a large crowd setting like a evangelical church or a show, a mentalist show like Darren's show, that's going to alter the effect, which he uses that, right? You can tell he's using the crowd effect, the excitement, the expectations, right, to fuel these outcomes that he's looking for. But we need to get smarter about our interactions within my field with patients and realize that that is probably a huge, if not all, of the effect, right? If we can create complete analgesia of pain, we can create improved function. I really encourage you to watch the show, especially if you're a clinician. A, just so you can think different. B, even if you just think it's crap, like to watch it. Watch somebody that has no classical clinical training in what they do with pain. My story, my personal story with this is I had a patient that came in here that he came in and he basically said, somebody referred me to you, but I'm scheduled for a double level lumbar fusion in 2 weeks. So I had 2 weeks to get to work, right? Well, we take this guy through top tier SFMA. That's all these movements. And we talked a little bit first, so I kind of started postulating some ideas, but we took him through all the movements. There was no increased pain with any of these movements, but this guy was on some opiates, some NSAIDs. So we started talking, and this guy had basically started to remove what we would call some meaningful tasks. So some things that he really identified with, deeply associated his identity with, that kept him active and kept him healthy, and now he's being robbed of those due to the pain. And if you get into the research and the study of pain neuroscience, you know that those meaningful tasks, once we take them away, it's almost like we create a snowball effect. The fact that you take those away compounds, just like compounding interest, the person's pain because they want to do the task, they can't do the task, they have more pain when they think about the not being able to do, right? Makes sense. It's kind of almost, it's not depression, but it's you're getting an emotional response to the lack of the ability to do something you like, as well as the emotional response to the pain itself. So we chatted with this fella for about 20 minutes, and then we stood up, we walked around, we went back through these movements, and this guy literally went from an 8 out of 10 to 0, right? No pain. This is a guy who's taking 2 extra strength Motrin first thing in the morning, a lower tab for lunch, and 2 extra strength Motrin at night to go to bed. So what was and this was not this is, again, like, I'm going to put a link to Darren Brown's website, and at the bottom of his page it says he does not have psychic abilities, magical powers. Like, this is basically using psychology to the nth degree. When we understand a little bit about how people work and we can use that to our advantage in clinical setting, it's huge. Now, did we still do things with this guy on a movement basis? Absolutely. There's, things that we could shore up that will help communicate via movement and via exercise to his nervous system, to his subconscious mind, to his fear centers, to his emotional centers in his brain, that he is okay. That's what a lot of rehab, in my opinion, is. It's reaffirming through movement, through load, through repetition, to your subconscious, to your nervous system, that you're okay. I think it's far less about actually what's occurring to the musculoskeletal system or to the nerves. Right? A lot of us think that I'm applying load to a tendon, a ligament, a muscle, and that creates a healing response. Well, what's interesting is, when you go into, let's talk about research on tendinosis, we know if we applied isometric loads over like a lot of time under tension, so 45 seconds to 2 minutes of load, like we talked on the last episode, over time, the duration of 2 to 3 weeks, we see that the actual thickness of a ligament or a tendon will increase. What we also found out is that where the initial trauma or the pathology, the tendinosis, tendinopathy doesn't actually ever heal. We just keep increasing the resiliency of that tissue, or the robustness of that tissue. So we still have that spot in there that we're, tying pain to if we looked at it from like a standard medical imaging standpoint, but there's not pain anymore. And then you also think about, when we go in and do MRIs on shoulders and look at torn rotator cuffs, but they're non-symptomatic, and then people that don't have any tears and they are symptomatic, we have to start understanding the psyche behind these things to really have the biggest bang for our buck. Because sometimes just getting rid of pain and getting some of the subconscious roadblocks out of the way is the biggest part to progress and getting success. That's the same thing if I've had a patient that, let's say they have, excessive amounts of pain, and anything we do is just killing them. Sometimes we do send them out for an injection because I need to override that pain just long enough to get their body moving, to go back to what we were saying of, if I can get you moving enough, with enough load, enough times, your body starts to speak to your nervous system and vice versa. And pretty soon we start to build a confidence level in basic functional fundamental movements, and that's what starts to create this catalyst for change. I don't think it's the fact that when we do McKinsey, we're actually, the disc is being, centrated, the nucleus pulposus is moving back to the middle of the disc. I don't think that's the case, and that's actually been shown numerous times that that's not the case. Actually, we're just moving in a palliative fashion, a non-painful fashion, enough times where your brain says, okay, I'll give up some ground here. I'll let you bend forward after we extend a bunch of times. So back to this guy that came in. His meaningful tasks were basically like some train to hunt stuff, which is basically putting on a backpack, getting your bow out, you hike, you shoot, you go up hills, mountains, you put weights in your pack. He had stopped doing this altogether. So I told him, when you go home tonight, you need to put your backpack on, no weight, and just go walk. And he's like, I'm going to be in pain. I was like, if you think you are, you will. Absolutely. Well, he went, and I think we took a 1.5 to 2 week hiatus. By the time he came back, he was hiking with weight in his pack every day, was having no pain, was still taking 2 Motrin every morning almost preemptively because he still hadn't bought in on a conscious level that he was fixed, right? He had had numerous imaging. The orthos had scared him. Your back is so bad, right? We need to fuse it. And then I think a week or 2 later, we had him back shooting his bow. An interesting thing with him is, I think it was probably a month, maybe a month and some change out, and he couldn't pull the bow back. I think it was 60-pound tension. I can't remember exactly. I'm not really a big archer. I think it was 60-pound tension or 65, and he couldn't pull it all the way back. He's like, dude, I just don't have the strength. If it's on 45, I got it all day. So we basically took him through different scenarios of shooting, the bow, like drawing in here, and it came down to like a lacked perceived ability to stabilize against the bow. So if we put him into different positions, he could pull. So again, our nervous system, our body, our subconscious mind is so powerful, it's going to throw up roadblocks and impediments if it thinks it's going to get damaged. And this is my analogy that I use all the time. If we are cavemen and women, I think I may have said this on the show before, so I apologize if I have. If we are cavemen and women, and I was out hunting a saber-toothed tiger with my tribe, and I sprained my ankle, I would probably go hide in a cave for a couple days while my ankle healed well enough to be able to load, because if I didn't hide, I'd be killed or eaten by another animal. Once my ankle healed enough to where I could load it, I would have to push myself pretty aggressively to be able to walk and to be able to run fairly fast. So A, I don't get eaten or killed by something else. B, so I can go hunt, because if I don't, there's a good chance that in a tribal culture like that, they wouldn't allow me to eat if I didn't hunt. Or if I didn't hunt or gather for myself, I wouldn't eat at all. So that push, that basically fundamental needs drive, right? The need to have food would drive me to rehab my ankle just by applying periodized load over time, right? I went and rest. I hid in my cave. There's my rest period. Now I have to load. I have to load progressively. If I did too much, I'd be back in the cave. So rehab is inherently built into the human. We live in a culture where we don't have those needs drives anymore, right? If you sprain your ankle, I can stay in a boot or stay in my car for 6 weeks while I think it's healing and go get food at the grocery store, go back to my cushy house, lay on the bed. So why wouldn't your nervous system say, you know what? This is kind of nice. I'm not expending energy, right? This dummy stopped running and exercising and using all his energy. I'm just going to keep storing up my energy, go to the grocery store, eat my Oreos, and I don't have to move around. But when I go back to running, what may my nervous system and my subconscious cueing centers do? Light my ankle up with pain, right? Light my back up with pain to say, nah, let's stop him from doing that. Let's stop her from doing that. Because we were doing just fine and we were conserving energy. You got to think from an evolutionary standpoint, the winners, right? One of the reasons that we think that humans hang on to adipose tissue is so we could basically hunt, gather, and in a harsher time, we could persist, right? So, and we're not going to get into like the aquatic ape theory of why we have, blubber. I don't know about all that stuff. But anyways, we have more adipose tissue than almost any other animal out there except a whale. So if I have this adipose tissue, I can store energy in it. So if I have to travel to my next spot, I'm a nomad, I have energy. Well, it makes sense now that we still have that evolutionary kind of drive to store energy, and that's why people overeat so much, and we eat foods that are hyperpalatable or high in fat, high in sugar, because those are the densest energy sources, right? If I was that hunter-gatherer and I found honey, I would eat as much as I could when I could because it was a rare find and it has a huge sugar density, so it's a major energy source, and then I could store some fat off the back end of taking in that sugar. But we don't have those drivers anymore. So I hope that makes sense to you, that your body may be throwing a curveball at you in the form of pain just to get you back into a comfortable position where you're not expending energy, because that's the evolutionary drive. So now we have to consciously push ourselves. That's why I have a job. I'm the one that pushes periodized load and progression over time, which is called rehab, right? Now, this does not mean if you sprain your ankle 2 days later, go run. That's also stupid. It hasn't healed. Another reason why I think I have a job is that I think we're becoming worse and worse or poorer listeners to our own body, right? So we don't know when I can go run and load, right? That's one of the biggest questions that I get, in particular from high school and collegiate athletes. When is this an injury or when is this pain that I should push through? I really think some of your best athletes, in particular in the endurance world, are the ones that intuitively know that, right? Because if they push too hard all the time, they'd be injured all the time. If they didn't push enough, they're not going to get any better. Those people that are really in tune with their body, they have that intuitive feel, they're going to be able to constantly feel where they're at and like, ooh, should I train hard today? Should I not? And we're getting worse at that because, A, we live in a very stressful time, so we push through pain and stress to be able to go, make $1, go, sit at my desk for another 8 hours. I got to provide for the kids, which is honorable. We also live in a time where we have medications to override pain, which interrupt some of that. We just have a lot of things that pull us out of this, and one of those is technology, right? Wearables, right? I rely on my watch or my iPhone to tell me my heart rate, tell me how many steps I got, tell me how I slept. So we're literally losing our ability to communicate with the best piece of technology you're ever going to get your body, right? So when I lose the ability to communicate, I've also lost the ability to basically progress, in my opinion. And if you look at some of the stuff that I post, a lot of it's on things like breathing. And I just put a post up yesterday about how breathing, I think, is one of the biggest keystones to increasing, in my world, what we would call proprioception, or increased afferent input. Right? If I'm always in this fight or flight response, it's really hard to take anything else, right? If I'm in a fight or flight response, I'm like focused in on this one thing. Yeah, your body is taking in all these other things, but your mind is having to filter one thing at a time. So if I'm being chased by a lion, I got to get away from that lion. Everything else doesn't matter at that time, even a broken leg, right? You've heard these stories all the time. Somebody has a traumatic injury, they don't feel it because they are in this sympathetic rush, this adrenaline rush. So sometimes we need to get people to calm down, go back into parasympathetic. We need them to get back in touch with their body. We need them to communicate with their body more often and better so that we can push through some of our rehab a little more intelligently on our own. Right? And I know, who knows where, when I get on this microphone, where it's going to go. We started talking about kidney stones and goats. Then we talked about a mentalist. Now we're talking about cavemen and like self-progressed rehab after hunting a saber-tooth tiger. Who the hell knows, right? I think it's fun, though. Let me know if you guys have any questions. So let me see if we covered everything here. So again, just going back to the Darren Brown, how we talk to patients is very important. So for the clinicians out there, some stuff I think you should look into. Neurolinguistics has been around forever. I believe, I may be wrong on this, so I'm sorry if I misquote. I believe the CIA helped develop neurolinguistics quite a while ago. But then also motivational interviewing, and I'll put up links to this. Motivational interviewing is again, it's a tactic. It's a way to get around talking to people where we're basically allowing people to create their own ideas for themselves rather than you as the practitioner or coach telling them what to do. Because we know, again, from experience and research that telling somebody to do something usually is going to produce a response where we say, well, I'm not doing that because that's not my idea. I'm going to do something else. But if we can get people to think it's their own idea and it's implicit, it comes from within, it's not explicit, it's not an outside in, right? Then that's far more powerful and we have a lot more follow through, a lot more consistency, and a lot more compliance. So I'll put in links to that. So we've covered a lot. I know, a lot of different stuff. Let me check through here real quick, see if you got any questions. Again, we're giving away some scratch to anybody that asks a question, so you let me know. Let me see if we got anything left here. But again, links to goat kidney stones, some pain neuroscience links. I'll link to Lorimer Mosley's book. I'll link to Darren Brown's website. I'll link to neurolinguistics, motivational interviewing. And the last thing I want to leave you with, if we don't have any questions here, is woo-woo and motivational speaker as this sounds. And I kind of almost have to like pinch myself that I'm saying this. Like the power to heal somebody is within themselves. Now, for my chiro friends, I am not saying that people, like I'm releasing innate through an adjustment. we still have to apply science to treatment. Now, what I mean by the power to heal is within yourself. There are some crazy stories out there. Sloan and I listened to a book on the way home. I believe it's called Dying to Meet Me. Yeah. Let me see if this is... I'll put a link to it. NDE... I think it's Dying to Meet Me, something like that. Yeah, Dying to Be Me. Yeah, so this is Anita Morjani. This is a really, really cool book. Basically, I'll let you read the book, but the gist of the story is this woman had terminal cancer. She basically died. She had a near-death experience. And she had massive, malignant tumors all over her body. And within 3 weeks, was cancer-free. And I know some people are going to be like, well, this is bullshit. Read the book. I don't know. Some crazy stuff happens. I don't think we've even tapped an iota of the power of the human mind. And it's going to be kind of cool as science meets up with some of the people in our world. And this is how I think how science just gets progressed. Science is meeting up with some of the people that are pushing the envelopes, right? I think it's very cool that you're seeing people like Brian McKenzie link up with Huberman Labs at Stanford to do these human performance studies on fear-based responses and breathing and vision. But you look at that and you're like, wait, Brian McKenzie, the guy that started CrossFit Endurance, that was an ultra runner, turned somewhat CrossFit Endurance, hybrid, then became this breathing kind of guru guy, is now working with Stanford. He's not a scientist, right? What was he doing? He was pushing the envelope on an N=1 experience. He was also coaching some other people. And then you see this is happening with, they have their group XPT, where it's Laird Hamilton. And if you're listening, Laird, you should have me there. You should invite me to your house in Malibu. XPT, it's all these people that are pushing the envelope. And then, all these professional athletes are wanting to work with people that have no classical coaching training, right? You have people from the NBA that go work with, Laird Hamilton, just to see what they're doing to push stuff. And all of these, the biohacking world and all this stuff, but you're seeing science meet anecdotal, N=1, personal intervention, and people are starting to study this stuff that isn't just coming out of what the university would like to see studied or what that personal researcher would like to see studied. We're actually trying to see what moves the needle. And I appreciate that. And we need more of those people out there. So if you are one of those people, I applaud you. If you're not, start looking at what these people are doing, right? You need to understand that if you're stagnated where you are, I don't care what your job is or even what your personal life is. If you're set in your ways and I'm happy doing my 9-to-5 job and going home to my family and going to a cookout on the weekend, that's totally fine. But I think there's nothing wrong with that. Please don't think I'm saying that the standard Americana life, there's anything wrong with that. All I'm saying is we're not even tapping an ounce of our potential as humans, in my opinion. And I used to be very much of the mindset that the way we tap that potential was through removing the body as a barrier, which I still believe that's somewhat true. And what I mean by removing the body is, you need to be pain-free, able to move very well in all ranges of motions. You need to have a clear mind. You need to have a healthy internal and external environment. All very important so that my body and my mind does not get in the way, or that they can interact as best they can. Also so I can interact with other people as best I can. If you're unhealthy, you don't stand a chance. But the more I'm getting into my own personal research and the more I read and the more I talk to other people, the more I'm realizing there may be a kind of a master controller when it comes to human potential, and we don't even know what that is yet. And this is not correlating that to God or some outside force. What I'm saying is we need to start to try to understand what occurs with things like spontaneous healing, what occurs with these people that can, perform crazy feats that no other people can. Stories from near-death experiences, people that, do push the limits in just these kind of, musculoskeletal or mental mindsets. And just all this stuff is getting mishmashed together. And yeah, there's the human performance side, but how does that equate for myself and in my practice where I deal with pain, right? Because pain is becoming we'd say it's an epidemic, the pain epidemic, and then therefore the opioid epidemic. I don't think it's an epidemic. I think, like I said, we're losing touch with our human body. So why wouldn't it want to communicate with you a little louder? And a lot of the way it's doing that is pain. All right, guys. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I know it's another solo one. Tomorrow, I am recording a podcast with a stud. Jeff Roberts is, I know this sounds weird to have a financial advisor. I think he goes by a wealth management professional. We'll find out tomorrow. But we're having Jeff on the show. Jeff is an awesome guy, but he steps way outside the bounds of just wealth management. We talk about how managing your assets and your wealth can create the scenarios for improved health, but how it's probably necessary for, again, like we just were saying, optimizing the human experience. So I hope you guys stay tuned for that. Appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you next time.